Hi friends, this is Diane from Boho Stamper, and I continue with Valentine cards in 2021. This video is divided into two parts because the first part we'll be making the background using a gel plate. So if you are not interested in how we created the background and want to just get into making the card, you might want to just go to part two, and that way you save some time. If you're hanging out with me and you want to see how we play around with our jelly plate here, we're going to get started. I have two sets of colors that I'm going to use with Stampin' Up's classic stamp pads. The first trio is Magenta Madness, Grapefruit Grove, which is a retired color, and Mango Melody. I'm using sponge rollers here. I'm still into my pink and orange combinations. I don't really know why I like that this year, but I do. So I'm taking my sponge roller and lifting some of the color from the stamp pad and brayering it onto the gel plate. I have in the past used a rubber brayer on this. I have not used a sponge brayer, so we're going to give it a go today. Just playing with different colors and some different techniques. We're going to add in a little bit of the oranges, blending them down into the pink, trying to make a nice transition and blending the colors. And then I'm just taking some of the excess ink off of my brayer before I set it aside. I'm going to use some watercolors to add some droplets. I've already spritzed this with water to activate my oranges and reddish oranges down there in the bottom right of my pan. If you don't have watercolor, you can most certainly use pigment sprinkles or brusho, or you could smush your stamp pad right onto your work surface there and spritz with a little bit of water, and then use a brush and it will act just like watercolor paint. No need to rush out and get a set of watercolors if you don't have them. So in researching, when I was first starting to use gel plates, I ran across a couple of ladies that are really experts using these gel plates. I've learned so much from them, and they both use Lavinia stamp and products. Tracy, who I do believe is the designer and possibly the owner of Lavinia Stamps, I'm not even quite sure. She is just remarkable. I've learned a lot from her. And Jo Rice is another lady who does a lot of demos and teaching about using the gel plates. So if you have a chance and you want to learn a little bit more, you might want to follow up with them. I have some Whisper White thick cardstock that I have cut 8.5 by 11 sheets in half, and I have a stack of those just sitting ready at the side here so that I won't have to stop and cut paper whenever I need it. So I'm laying a piece of that Whisper White on to my gel plate and then just giving it a little bit of a rub over so that the paper can absorb the ink. And then peeling back my cardstock, we can see where I've added the watercolor splatters. I do have a couple of lines there from the brayers, but it almost looks like sunshine rays, so this background will definitely get used at some point on a card, but I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it yet. For my second one, I'm going to use Stampin' sponges, and these are nice large sponges. I cut mine into 6. I'll cut one of these rounds in half and then cut my half into thirds. that's just a good size for me to hold when I'm getting the ink from my sponges. You're more than welcome to cut them as small as you like or as large as you like. So a gel plate is sort of, for those of you who may not have ever seen them before, is sort of a sticky little pad and can be used for any number of mediums, not just for our dye inks, but also for acrylics or alcohol ink or watercolor. There are a lot of artists out there who do a lot of different things with their gel plates. I really like using this. It's a lot of fun to see the different backgrounds that are created. I don't think there's any two that ever come out the same. I don't know how you could possibly do that, but that's what makes it fun. And by using my half of my 8.5 sheet of cardstock, I'll be able to pick out the section of the background that suits the card that I'm making. So if there's a section, like I said, that first one that had the little lines on it that almost looks like sunshine rays, that might be nice for maybe the background on Hey Chicks, putting a sunrise in the background of the chicks in the barnyard. So we'll have to see how that comes out. So I'm adding again Magenta Madness here in the bottom and then blending in a little bit of the oranges. Just with my sponges, I'm picking up ink from the stamp pad and adding it to the gel plate. And at this point, once your ink is added to the gel plate, you don't even need to add water droplets or sprinkles to the back. If you don't want to, you can very easily just lay down your cardstock and pull the paint and have a beautiful blended background of different colors. I like the splatters personally. You can use just plain water or, like I said, any of the other color waters that you may have handy. Again, this is by no means any encouragement for you to run out and buy these products, but if you have them and you're new to using a gel plate or you've thought about getting one and weren't quite sure what you were going to do with it, this is just some exercises and practice getting to use your inks in a different variety of ways. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the orange to my watercolor, and I got a couple bigger droplets here, but that's okay because once we pull back our cardstock, it makes some really pretty designs. I do want to get better at making some of my splatters smaller, but in this instance, it actually worked out better. And even if you're not happy with your background that you create, the nice thing about a gel press is you can always add a second layer and put your card base back on there and pull up more color until you're happy with your background. And it's just paper. So you can play with this as much as you like. And if your results are something that you can use, then yay. And if not, you have the other side where it's not 24 karat gold. You can throw it away and get a new piece of paper. So pulling this one back, and this is with the sponges. I really like this background. I love how the bigger droplets of orange did make those nice spots on there. And comparing it to the brayered background, these will make some really pretty card backdrops. So the third experiment that I'm doing here, I guess we could call it, when I was studying up on this and watching the ladies from Lavinia Stamps, they used these little blending sponges. They call them smoothies. And so I did order a pack of them because I wanted to try this on my gel plate, and that was one of the reasons I was working with that today. They're much softer than the sponge. They're as soft as the Stampin' Up! Blending brushes, so I'm anxious to see how this works. Just being respectful of time, I didn't want to start messing around with blending brushes on the gel press. I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know if it will leave little spots or lines maybe in my background that I might not like. But I'll try it one day just to see how that's gonna work. Maybe pouncing the little blending brushes on there like I'm doing here with the smoothie. Well, I don't know, we'll see. But I didn't do that today. I did use the smoothies. These little sponges can also be used to blend backgrounds on your different layered panels for your cardstock too, just like you use your blending brushes. So far, the blending brushes are probably my favorite method of blending in colors together. But practice makes perfect, and so if I like how these work out, I'll have to practice with them and get used to using them, since this is a new product for me to try. I think that they are the same as blending brushes. You don't really want to clean them a lot. You want the ink to absorb into them and have your little smoothies and your blending brushes with the ink in there. So in this background, we're just going to add a little bit more of the water that I had cleaned my brush in there. It's got some orange tint still in there. And then I did decide to go back and add a little bit more of the reddish orange color to it. And that is my pretty rainbow pen that I'm using to tap my brush on, that we got last year from Stampin' Up's on stage in our little swag box. I love my rainbow pen. So again, we're just tapping on some of the watercolor droplets, adding the cardstock to the top of the gel plate. We'll do a little smooth over here to let the cardstock absorb the color. And I'm not really pressing hard on here. And even though it looks like my gel plate's sliding around, it's the plate itself I have on an acrylic block. The gel plate is sticky enough that the cardstock kind of sticks to it and doesn't slide around. And we'll do a peel here, and I can see where I do want to practice a little bit more with those smoothies, since I left a lot of spots there, but I like circles, so I might be able to do something with that. They almost look like flowers in the background. So here we have the smoothie underneath, and the sponges, and our brayer. And I'm just going to make a note on the bottom of each of these, because by the time I'm done with this and I go back to use my backgrounds or recreate some of these um, techniques, I'll forget by then what I used. So those are brayer and the sponges and then the smoothies. Then I'm just going to clean up my work table here a little bit so that we can use some of the blue and purple inks. I'm going to use just a piece of scrap paper and lay it on my gel plate to lift off any of the residual ink that's on there. And you don't have to do this if you want the color that's on your gel plate, if there's any left on there, if you don't mind that being in your next background, you can most definitely not try to pull any more off. I just didn't really want my pinks and oranges to blend in with my blues at this point, so just a quick little rub to take the ink off. And I'll spritz my brush to get that orange off of there. Again, since I'm going to move into purple and blue. So my colors that I'm using from Stampin' Up! On the next trio are Highland Heather, which is a very light purple, Misty Moonlight, and Pacific Point. These three colors together blend really pretty to make either a sky background or a seaside background. I've used them for sky backgrounds in previous cards and then taken some silver paint, silver metallic, and splattered onto my blues to make kind of a starry nighttime sky, and it comes out really pretty. So the Highland Heather, like I said, is a light purple, and I'm going to use the sponges, and I begin my Highland Heather with the sponge, and am afraid that it's not dark enough on the gel plate. And I did have to cut some sponges here real quick because I can't find my blues and greens that I already have started in my brayers and sponges. I did find them after my video was done, of course, but in the meantime, I just cut a few new pieces of sponge. So the Highland Heather, like I said, I was afraid that it wasn't showing up on the gel plate and that I wouldn't have enough purple on my cardstock. But even watching my own video, I can see where the purple really was transferring to the plate. There is a lot of ink on the gel plate, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it. So I used just the stamp pad itself and added some ink, which is another technique that you can use. And then I moved into the Misty Moonlight and Pacific Point and blended those colors into the purple also, just with a sponge and pouncing the color into there so that it transitions over nice and doesn't leave any lines, I hope. And adding some Pacific Point. And we'll just blend that down over top of some of the Misty Moonlight and leaving a little bit of the Pacific Point strictly by itself at the top. I was glad that I had a little bit of time to play with the gel plate. I don't take it out very often. It's not even as messy as some of the other techniques that we use, but by the time I get done pulling out all of the colors that I want to try, and it seems like it's a never-ending practice day for me because I just like doing it. So I'm just adding a little bit more color in here again because I was afraid that my colors wouldn't be dark enough on the cardstock. And then rather than using watercolors to add droplets to my background, I just used a water spritzer and spritzed some clear water onto my gel press or my gel plate. And I'm holding that bottle up high enough so that the mist that is spreading onto the gel plate will create very small droplets. We'll add some Whisper White here and smooth over. And then pulling this card background off. I'm really very happy with this background. I think that that just looks like a beautiful sky background, and I can't wait to use that one on a card. I do have a little piece of fuzz probably from my paper towel there, and if there is a hair or a fuzzy or something on your gel plate, it will make an impression on your card background. So that's a good one. Definite keeper. Okay, so we're going to do another one with our blues, I believe. Nope. So I'm going to clean off my blues and purples because I did remember that I wanted to share with you that you can also use a stencil on the gel plate for some very unique designs. So I pulled out my heart stencil. This poor little heart stencil is starting to show some wear and tear. And then I just took that smoothie with the Magenta Madness and started pouncing the ink onto the stencil. So the ink is going to fill in all of the little heart shapes on my gel plate, but it's also getting ink onto the stencil itself. So we almost have a positive and a negative of hearts that we can use. So I'm trying to fill this in a little heavier on the top of the stencil and then lighten it up a bit as I go towards the middle and the bottom of the stencil. Just another heart background that I wanted to do since I realized I am supposed to be doing some Valentine cards here. I only have about another week left to craft any of those, so I don't know how many more Valentines we'll get in here. And then I almost laid my cardstock right on top of the stencil and realized that what I wanted to do was pick the hearts up from the gel plate itself. So I caught that quick enough, laid my stencil aside, smoothed my cardstock on top of the stenciled background, and pulled the paper to reveal just a pretty basic heart background. That's okay, nothing fancy. And now I'm going to take my heart stencil and turn it over, and I'm going to press, I guess it would be the positive side, right, onto the gel plate. And then just for fun, because that's what we do is have fun, I added a little bit of the orange around one corner of my gel plate. I'm not really sure how much of the pink ink is going to stick to that, but adding a little bit of orange will brighten it up. A little bit of water. make a few splatters and we'll add our cardstock and see what happens on this one. So just having fun here. I really like how the orange around the top of that came out on the hard background. And I can already tell the section of that I would use on a card. And then I still had my stencil left here. And there's some ink on there. So I took that one piece of background and turned it over. I didn't really know if there was enough ink on there to create another background or not. So I just rubbed it on the back of one of my pools and there really wasn't enough. We pretty much taken all the ink off that stencil. Excuse me. So I'll just wipe that off and set it aside. I don't know what I'm going to do for a heart background if I rip this stencil because I use this for everything. I don't know, Valentine's Day just wouldn't be the same without this. Alrighty, so since we are working on Valentine, I'm pulling the rest of the ink off of my plate there with just a piece of clean scrap paper. I decided that I would probably add some pinks and purples. I think that's what we're working on. Maybe I'm still working on blue. Let's see. Okay, so we are still into blues. We're adding a little bit of our Misty Moonlight to the background. Some Pacific Point added to that. And this does look like I'm adding more blue again, but I really do think it's the Highland Heather that I'm sponging on there. I think it is the pale heather color. And we'll just mist this with our water spritzer again to add some droplets to the background. Cam has decided that she's gonna play and stomp her feet around here a little bit. I'm trying to get both of these videos edited because they take so long to upload to YouTube, and I want to get both of them out there so that you can either play around with backgrounds on a gel plate or you can make another Valentine, but I need my background first so that we can use it for the Valentine. This one also came out very cool. Really pretty for sky backgrounds. And now I've decided that I better get on with my Valentine background, and so I'm just going to add right directly from my stamp pad. I'm adding some of the Magenta Madness and Highland Heather. And then I'm just going to use my sponge to blend the two together. That way I don't contaminate the ink pad by getting pink into my heather and heather into my pink. So I'm just blending these colors over top of each other a little bit. Looking good. And we'll add some little spritzes to that. I think for this one, I'm using a bit of a reddish orange. And I accidentally got more orange on my brush than I wanted to. So I just pulled in a smaller paintbrush after cleaning this off and got some of that reddish color out. And added that to my work pad here and then spritzed it with a little bit of water. And now I can use my fan brush to add more of a reddish orange. Excuse me. And again, I think I'm going to get a couple of larger droplets here. And I did go back with my paper towel and I'm not touching the gel plate. I just allowed the paper towel to absorb some of the water out of those larger drops. I really was trying to keep my splatter smaller here, but so I just took a little bit of the water from the gel plate. Added my cardstock, smoothed over the plate. So if you've stuck through the whole video with me to the end here, this will be the background that I use on my Valentine. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope this gave you some ideas. I like this background, and I'm going to trim out a part of this that we will use for our card. So remember, if you have any questions or I can help you out with something, feel free to email me at diane@bohostamper.com and I'll do my best to help you out. So stay tuned for part 2 and we'll create a Valentine.